Hello everybody, welcome to week 3. This is the end of week 3 for youth work practice, and this week, whilst we're waiting for people to come online, I thought I might model a recording for you to help you work through assessment 1, which is due in week 5. So what I'm going to do is share my screen with you now so that you can see where we are in week 5, and we can go through the assessment together and you can understand the parameters of the assessment, because this will help you, I think. Okay, so let's start, shall we? We've got this assessment here. It says assessment task 1, case study analysis during week 5. You are to write a report that details your preparation for a client assessment meeting with Danny, the client at the Hillsvale Hub Youth Centre. The context of this case study is provided in the following pages: context of the assessment, Hillsvale Hub, and case study Danny. Following this is a rubric for you to fill out in response to this. The rubric is downloadable as a separate document on your class base, and that rubric is really my marking criteria. So we'll have a look at that at the end, but before that, let's read through the context and then the case study of Danny. So the context is your role, basically. So in this assessment task, it's based around your role as a case manager at the Hillsvale Hub Youth Centre, which is a fictitious youth centre which is modelling what a real youth centre would do and how you might encounter information and clients. So the Hillsvale Hub is a youth centre situated in the outer suburbs. It provides services for young people in the community, including recreational programs, drop-in cafe, case management, outreach, out-of-school education programs. There are 4 core members of staff and some casual workers. These include a full-time coordinator, a part-time generalist youth worker, and a part-time administration support worker and casual workers for special projects. In addition to this team, the Hillsvale Hub provides an office to outreach visits by other government and non-government agencies, including Centrelink and Legal Aid, policy youth liaison officers, DHS, Department of Housing, and Department of Community Services, case managers. So this is called hot desking as well, by the way, as a reference point. You have recently been employed by the Hillsvale Hub as their case manager for young people with complex needs. Your position reports to the case coordinator, and in your role you're expected to undertake the following duties: conducting intake interviews, client assessments, develop, monitor case plans, provide individual support, information referral, advocacy services to your clients, ensure all services are culturally sensitive, appropriate, and culturally safe for Australian Torres Strait Islanders, community, culturally and linguistically diverse clients. I don't know why that's doubled up. Use, maintain, and review current pro forma documents and follow procedures outlined in the Hub's Policy and Procedures Manual. Use, maintain, and review existing policies and procedures and draft new ones, and particularly in relation to workplace health and safety. Where necessary for staff working with young people with behavioural issues, and particularly in relation to workplace health and safety, and oversight the development of professional development programs for staff in relation to working with young people, behavioural management issues, oversight the development of programs for young people in relation to behavioural management issues. I think that's doubled up too, isn't it? Okay, I didn't write the manual. Right, scenario. Danny is your client. So Danny is Danny Freeman. He's presented looking for housing support. So he's saying he's homeless, and you've been assigned as a case manager. Date of birth, 17th of the 5th, 1996. So as of now, he's about 22. Still a young person. 22, you think, oh, is that a young person? Yeah, until about the age of 25. He can be classified as a young person. So Danny is 20 years of age, out of date, and currently lives with 7 friends in a shared house that's overcrowded. all the tenants of the current housing are being evicted at the end of the week, so you've got 5 days to find something for Danny. Now, Danny Freeman is a Torres Strait Islander, 20 years of age, currently lives with 7 friends. Sorry, it was, Danny has had a falling out with his family, so he's been estranged since he was 16 from his family. He's been couch surfing, sleeping on the streets ever since due to his transient lifestyle. He has very few personal belongings and has reported to workers in the past he has difficulties managing his personal hygiene and often wears the same clothes for weeks at a time. Danny has been involved in a variety of community agencies over the past few years. However, due to past experiences with community agencies, Danny has stated that he doesn't trust many workers as often they've let him down. Okay, now let's Danny is a private man and he doesn't like discussing his personal life. At times he appears to be nervous and very withdrawn when he's engaging in conversation. Danny has been observed demonstrating unusual behaviours, such as appearing to speak to somebody who is not there, and as a result, there are concerns he has an undiagnosed mental illness. Danny has disclosed to a previous worker that he has a drinking problem. When he receives his financial benefits, he will often buy alcohol instead of food or personal care products. He has tried to cut back and says that he has had a few weeks when he didn't drink, but that was when he had some cash in his pocket. That when he has cash in his pocket, he finds it difficult not to buy alcohol. And in terms of this, after the case management, after meeting with Danny and identifying his primary needs, you've made several referrals to other community organisations, including a mental health team, Department of Housing, Drug and Alcohol Counsellor, and a life skills course. In the 4 weeks' time, you plan to hold a case conference. So that will be a meeting amongst all the professionals, all the stakeholders involved with Danny, and possibly a representative for Danny. And other workers currently involved in supporting Danny. The purpose of this meeting will be to further consolidate the partnerships with professionals, monitor support services, see how well he's engaging in his case plan. Is it working? Is it not working? What's working? What isn't working? And empower him to make appropriate and positive life choices. Now, that's a thing that you will be doing, and there will be a workshop where you will attend a workshop and model this assessment process. And at the end of our assessments, there will be another assessment where you will be required to look at the case management meeting, the case conference, and you'll be engaged in assessments around that. But today, your job for assessment 1 during week 5 is to answer some questions. So I thought we'd go through the questions, knowing that the context is you're a worker at the Hillsvale Hub. Here's your client, Danny. How are you going to prepare for the meeting? What things do you need to be aware of, and what do you need to do? So we've got an assessment form here, and here's how, using the information on the previous page, answer the questions. As a case manager, you need to be able to educate Danny on your roles and responsibilities. Identify the key roles and responsibilities of you as a case manager and the key rights Danny has as a client in the case management process, including identifying the relevant code of ethical practice you will follow. Now, on your course in weeks 2 and 3, you will find all the details you need to answer this question. And basically, there are 5 things that you need to begin case meetings with whenever you're in a meeting with a client, and they're called the 5 C's. You ask somebody if they're comfortable, you ask them if they're clear about what the processes are and their understanding of the roles. You ask them if they understand confidentiality and their rights to privacy, and how you'll store and record any information that's theirs. You'll tell them about their ability to be able to make formal complaints if they're unhappy with the service. And you'll talk to them about their commitment in the role and their participation and what you'll do for them. What is a case manager? How far do you go as a case manager? And what is their participating aspect here? Because they're not passive visitors. They're actually meant to be coming on the ride with you, so to speak. So you need to explain that to the clients in terms as succinctly as possible. So weeks 2 and 3, if you're not clear about the answer to that. Go back and review. Your organization takes a client-centered approach. What does client-centered mean? So again, there's assessment, there's information in, I think, week 2 about what does client-centered mean. What does that, as a definition, what does that actually mean? What does that mean? Something? Is the client is at the center of all the decisions? What does that actually mean? So think about that. Write that answer down there. Name at least 3 factors that would be important in ensuring you as a case manager, your organization and stakeholders involved in Danny's case are operating within the appropriate legislative requirements. Include any duty of care you have working with Danny. So legal, this is the legal ramifications of what's going on and so on. So mentions duty of care. So why don't we talk about duty of care? You have a duty of care to inform appropriate parties if you feel that Danny is at risk and that he's at risk to himself, and you have a duty of care, and an ethical responsibility, which is not legal, by the way. Ethical is something different to legal, but it's about a personal or an organizational commitment to show respect to somebody, so that you have an ethical requirement to tell Danny about that. Not legally required to tell Danny, but you have an ethical requirement to tell Danny that you will be reporting him to authorities if you feel he's at risk or he's putting anyone else at risk. So that's one of them. So what are the other key legal factors? Well, you've got to look after his information. If he gives you information, that information is private and shared between you. Now, you're not a lawyer. There's a legal thing about this. You're not his lawyer, so you're not a priest, and you're certainly not a doctor. So that information is not protected under that legislation. But because Danny has shared that information with you, he has a right to expect that you will treat it with kid gloves, and so you'll make sure that it's correctly stored and that it's not disseminated to people without his prior permission to do so. And you have a legal responsibility to provide appropriate services to Danny if you feel that he is in need of something. That's not necessarily a legal thing, but that's a sense of duty of care beyond the reporting. Other than that, legal factors, I think we've pretty much covered that. Privacy, protecting stored information, and a duty of care to report to other organizations if you're concerned that Danny is at risk or is putting other people at risk. It's an interesting curly question because there are lots of ethical dilemmas that can come up with this. You know, if Danny says he's got AIDS, for example, he's HIV positive, but he's having unsafe sex, can you report him? You don't need to answer that, but you do need to point in those 3 questions. 2 statutory requirements you must observe when obtaining information from other key stakeholders involved in Danny's case. 1, you must identify what the information is that you need and why you need it. Specifically, it has to be related to something that you are doing for Danny. So you can't just go ring up a service and go, does Danny have a girlfriend? Just want to know, for example. Is Danny gay? Just checking. I don't know. You can't do that. Basically, you have a responsibility to Danny to respect Danny's privacy by only looking for information that, 1, he gives you his permission to obtain, and 2, that information is required in the role of providing a case plan and supporting Danny in the role of as his caseworker. So there's 2 statutory requirements. Written permission might need to be, should be faxed off, and that it shouldn't be a blanket permission statement that you go, oh, Danny, sign this and I'll just fax this to people when I want some information. You should only be, and Danny should be aware of what information, why it's required, who it's coming from, who's supplying it, and then writes a document to confirm that he agrees that you will collect specific information for a specific reason from a specific person, and that he will sign that document and you will share that, and that will be kept as a record. So the other thing is record keeping. Somebody sends you a permission to divulge information, that is a record, and that needs to be specific so that somebody doesn't come along later and then say, oh, can I have that other information as well? Can I just get some more information which hasn't been agreed by Danny, for example? So that's quite important. The keeping of information is very important here. Okay. Name 3 types of information you may need to gather. Well, we looked at Danny. Danny's got potential problems with his family. He's estranged from his family. He's on an income, on a welfare income, pension income. Might need to find out what that is. Is it an unemployment benefit? Is it a disability benefit? Because if it is, he might have a diagnosis for something from another region. You don't know. What other services is he involved with? That's another point of information. Has he been involved with mental health service or drug and alcohol services? Those sorts of information, important. What are his goals? What does Danny want? That's important as well. In order to work with Danny, why don't you ask him what he wants? Easy, right? Often overlooked. It's not what do you want, it's kind of, here's what we've got, take it or leave it. But why don't you ask him what he wants? Actually work with Danny to find out what he wants, and then you keep using that as the kind of carrot to keep Danny coming along in the journey of dealing with his case management. Income, drug and alcohol issues, mental health problems, any assessments that he might have had for mental health, history of involvement with other services, any other services anywhere, history with his family, history of violence, possibly. Has he been involved with the police? Possibly. You don't necessarily need that, but that might be relevant if some of that, something pops up and he's, when I was in prison, you go, wait a minute, you're in prison. Oh, really? What happened there? Find that out, because you want to know as much as possible that's relevant to help you provide an appropriate level of support to Danny. Not to be prurient and nosy, just because you need to find, there's no point putting him in a situation that you know has failed in the past. So you want to kind of, that's why you need information. Identify 3 boundaries and behavioural expectations you'll need to discuss with Danny when meeting with him for the first meeting. How will you raise these issues with Danny, and what will you do to ensure his dignity is maintained? Okay. So 3 boundaries. So he needs to be respectful of people that he's involved with through your agency and through other agencies and other workers and towards you. He needs to maintain composure, be calm, and that means he can't become violent or abusive. You will do the same thing for him. You will discuss that as a shared respectful agreement, that he needs to not come into the service substance affected, that he meets his obligations as well to follow up with his case plan. So if you say, okay, next week going to Centrelink, he goes to Centrelink next week. Those are the 3 expectations, that he maintains behavioural, appropriate respect for everybody, that he won't be substance affected, and that he will meet his case management obligations. And that you, even though he may be exited from the service, and think about that word, he's not being fired, he's not being sacked, he's sorry, you're being exited, we can't provide you with support any longer because you have not met your obligations. So think about that. We have very little in our canon to work with to keep Danny going straight, but it never does a lot of good to keep smacking people around the head with a stick saying, you said you do it, you said you do it, you said you do it. Sometimes appropriate, sometimes not. I would say, Danny, possibly not. How would you observe cultural considerations when working with Danny on the case management plan? Well, let's think about that. If we just moving on from that last point, Danny said he would go to an appointment, he didn't go. That might be a common trait for people of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander backgrounds where they don't often follow up. So does that mean because they're from our Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander backgrounds, why would you be so strict about that if you know that that's a common thing that doesn't happen? That maybe their understanding of a cultural understanding of appointments is not the same way that we might view attending appointments, with the same level of, yes, I've made a commitment, yes, I will be there. If something else pops up and Danny can't contact you or doesn't think it's important to contact you, and maybe he says, well, you know, I said it at the time, but I changed my mind and I don't feel good about telling you about that, so I'm just going to say nothing. So there's a cultural consideration there. But then again, that might be an assumption on my part. And so there's another cultural consideration don't make assumptions about and generalizations about people from specific backgrounds, because that can be kind of rude. It's a double-edged sword, this, right? It's not an easy path to follow, but you need to be clear that you're not stereotyping people. But then again, you might need to be aware that there are generalizations that can occur from specific cultures. So Danny might be transient, for example, and that means he might leave your service. He's made a commitment to come and follow up every week, and then he just goes and he doesn't tell anyone. But does that mean you slam the door in his face next time? No, because he's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. For that matter, you're going to put him into Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander services. That's another point that you need to be aware of. Maybe that's an appropriate thing to do. And maybe he might need support from his own community to manage certain things. And that's the most appropriate referral to make. So you can ask Danny about that. Maybe he doesn't want to be involved. Ask him about that too. Okay, so how would you ensure personal values don't impact on Danny in case outcomes? Well, everything becomes Danny's choice, basically. You might want Danny to get a certain job, but he might not want a job. And you can't make him get one. And if you made him get one and it fails, then maybe that ends up with that more of that cycle of Danny not trusting workers because they've let him down. And his interpretation of his being let down might be people aren't following and doing what he wants them to do, it's his life. You can't make him into a model citizen. You can give him opportunities that he can either choose to accept or not accept. Okay, we're getting near to the end of this now, and I need to finish soon. So, just let it fly. There it is. Describe how you will record the outcomes of the meeting, where the meeting data will be stored, and how Danny will be able to access the information he needs. Well, it's his information. He can access it any time by asking somebody. You can also record the outcome of the meeting. Sorry about that. You can also record the access of the meeting. So the information in the meeting, I beg your pardon, I just have some disturbance outside, I don't know what that was about. Where the recorded data will be stored privately and securely, and people without passwords and people without permission won't be able to access information. It's his, and it will be stored appropriately. If it's paper, it'll be in a locked cabinet with limited access, and only the case manager and the management should be able to see it, and Danny himself at any point. And that's why you should also be very careful about the information that you are recording about Danny. And finally, where are we? Number 10, let's get to number 10. In preparing for the case conference meeting, describe the different types of goals you would aim to explore with Danny and give possible examples of each. Well, he needs housing, doesn't he? That's a goal. He might want a job, might not. He might have a mental health issue that he needs to address. He might not want to address that. He might have a drug and alcohol issue that he may or may not want to address. He might have some social things that you could work on with him on. And that's could be of vital importance to help Danny, to help his self-esteem and to give him opportunities to get off of drinking, because drinking is a lifestyle. You've got to understand this. Substance abuse is not a thing. It's not an aberrant behavior. It's a lifestyle. His friends do it. He does it. He does it with his friends. It's something to do. And when he hasn't got any money, he can hang out with his mates and they'll give him a drink. And that becomes a cultural lifestyle, a circle where people get caught up in. And if you treat it as a cultural lifestyle and consider that you need to give him options to do something else that fulfill some of the benefits of drinking, that drinking does for him in the meantime, then you might offer him pathways away from drinking all the time. And then hopefully that might be a way out. May not, maybe it'll work. So there's some of the goals that you can explore. Reconnection with his family, relocation to his hometown. Some of these sorts of things could be an ongoing engagement with services, or understanding that maybe if he's fairly transient, that he might come and go and can still be involved with services, and that might be okay too. Okay, so I'm going to say goodbye now. We've finished, we've done 25 minutes of this, and here's the marking criteria, by the way, that you have discussed and explained each of those points, and I will provide you with feedback on those to ensure that If you haven't fulfilled that requirement, I will make a comment about that in that. Okay, so thanks very much for your time. I'm going to end our recording now. I look forward to seeing you online sometime. Take care. Have a great week 4, which is starting this week. Okay, bye.